My comments focus on the troubling new evidence about Line 5's corrosion and underwater currents and why this triggers the independent and affirmative duty of the state of Michigan and that of its elected and appointed officials and agencies to enforce the express terms and conditions of the 1953 easement with Enbridge. First, we must remember that the state of Michigan holds title to navigable waters and trust for the use and benefit of the public and future generations. This means that where private interests, such as easements, conflict with public interests in those waters, the public interests trump the private ones as a matter of law.
That's right.
Under the seminal case, Illinois Central Railroad, a state cannot abdicate its trust responsibilities over property in which the public has an interest any more than it can abdicate its police power. In addition, the state must not only take action to prevent endangerment of the trust, but it also must take affirmative steps to protect the trust, particularly where new evidence suggests substantially likelihood of pollution, impairment, or destruction, and that's exactly the case we have here today. Second, as we have read and now heard from Enbridge, the biota encrusting these underwater pipelines raise fundamental structural integrity issues and compliance with the easement. Section 9A of the easement reads, all pipe shall be protected by an asphalt primer coat by inner and outer wrap composed of glass fiber and wooden slats. Anything less is a violation of their legal agreement that allows Enbridge to occupy our public waters. By discounting and withholding critical information essential to evaluating the risk of continued operation, Enbridge also violates the easement's requirement to take all reasonable and prudent measures to protect private and public property and human and safety for health. Third, independent evidence corroborates the physical deterioration of the Line 5 pipelines. The recent video in the Straits by Dr. Tim reveals missing and dislodged coating, broken bands, detached wooden structural slats, unsupported segments, and apparent rust and pitting. Last week, Dr. Tim released a 65-page independent technical report on the impacts, and he concluded that peak currents in the Straits are nearly twice the velocity of those considered when Line 5 was designed, that the encrusted invasive mussels make it impossible to confidently evaluate the condition of the protective coatings, that certain support and protection systems required by the original easement are now demonstrably entirely missing, and that certain sections of Line 5 may only be one peak current away from a catastrophic failure. These failures, documented by both Enbridge and the Tim reports, add to the mounting evidence of the unacceptable risk that this infrastructure poses to the Great Lakes. Moreover, Enbridge's failure to adequately maintain Line 5 is a violation of the easement. This new evidence suggests likelihood of pollution to trust resources, and the state of Michigan has an independent fiduciary duty to enforce its legal obligations to protect the paramount interests of the public. This duty is perpetual in nature and under rule of law. This duty is also separate and independent from the important investigative work of this advisory board. Waiting to take action pending the advisory board's review of two nominal independent risk and alternative studies is simply not an option. But simply failure to act is an abdication of the state's public trust duties. Thus, at a bare minimum, we expect that the state of Michigan will issue a notice of violation to Enbridge. In closing, we must never forget the global importance of the Great Lakes. They contain 20% of the planet's fresh surface water, and yet somehow America's most dangerous underwater oil pipeline continues to operate in the heart of these waters. We've heard our state leaders acknowledge that the days of this pipeline are numbered and that Line 5 wouldn't be built today. However, the state of Michigan has not taken a single preventative measure to make our Great Lakes safer from a catastrophic oil spill. Instead, the state has authorized an increase in Line 5's oil volume without any review of environmental risks or alternatives, and continues to allow Enbridge to operate in violation of the easement with inadequate lake bed supports, missing coating and slats, deficient emergency spill response plan, and inadequate insurance liability, just to name a few. Line 5's ultimate failure is not a question of if, but when, and delay is unacceptable given the ticking time bomb of this aging infrastructure. So we ask when the state of Michigan will exercise its authority and leadership to prevent the unthinkable, a catastrophic oil spill that would destroy the Great Lakes, our drinking water, our economy, and our way of life. Thank you.